Hello, welcome to another UTS Startups Confessions. Okay, it's a rainy Friday, it's dark behind us, but it's bright inside because we have a very bright person to interview today, Tom Hunt from BiModal. A little bit forced, but wait for it, it gets better. In 30 seconds, please, what is BiModal?
Absolutely. BiModal is a SaaS platform that aims to make basically state-of-the-art marketing science available to every marketing team. You asked me to say what that means, like in particular.
Yeah, what does that actually mean?
So it allows teams to run things like media mix models or incrementality tests, sort of like A/B tests, to test whether or not the campaigns they're running are actually driving, revenue, sales, some sort of uplift, as opposed to having to rely on, the attribution that your, Facebook account, Google account, or ad agency is giving you. So, yeah, trying to make those available to people who don't have a PhD in econometrics.
Okay, I feel like you've piqued people's interest in that, and we need to dive a little bit deeper. So I'm going to go off script for a second.
Sure.
Like this, in my kind of simple brain, you'll go along and buy a billboard or like invest in because you came from Koala before this, and raise your hand if you've heard of Koala. Yeah,
cool.
They're a wonderful company and a wonderful founder as well. It's, I think, interesting to look at how they bought things and how that actually worked.
Yeah.
And maybe that leads us to BiModal as well. So how did that work?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was very much my villain origin story. Koala was really good at buying online advertising, and the team there were killer at understanding how to read the reports that they did have, how to finesse the Facebook ads manager. And then we eventually got to a point where once every single person in Australia on Facebook has seen your ad at least once, what do you do if you need to grow more and allocate more advertising budget? Well, you have to start looking outside of just the online sort of digital channels. And we started to do things like buy a little bit of radio experimentally, or buy a cheeky billboard outside of IKEA, making fun of IKEA, which was very fun.
That was awesome.
Or even doing some small TV campaigns. And that led us into the sort of dark forest of trying to actually justify whether or not any of this stuff is having any impact. And when you start getting up to reasonably big campaigns, the CFO is going to eventually knock on your door and be like, why did you just spend $500,000 on Channel 9? And you need an answer which is more convincing than just the vibes were good. But you don't really have any tools to do that, right? If you're used to...
Surely Channel 9 gives you a tool.
No.
Or tries to.
If you're buying through an agency, you will get a very shiny PDF afterwards that tells you, your effective share of voice is this percent, and it should be that percent, and you reach this much, and we think that your brand equity has gone up by this much, and it's all kind of bullshit, basically, verging on fraud in some cases. So there has
not
to
Channel
be,
9 specifically,
not Channel
but
9.
this generally.
No, the channel owners actually don't try and play that game. So if you're buying direct, that's if you're buying through an agency. If you're buying direct, you're kind of on your own. What they will give you is exactly what you bought and when you bought it. And so that's what led us into trying to do some interesting analytics around, can we do some sort of uplift testing? Can we do something cool called spot attribution? But we won't get into that, that's another talk. There's a whole bunch of little techniques, but they're very, very hard to implement. And we only got maybe, even at Koala, 75% of the way into getting it working. But even that actually let us drive the campaigns and do things that were better than just setting money on fire for sort of a 2-year period and grow to that next level. So that was really cool.
So I don't want to give away too much about Koala, but you would be my go-to for anyone spending $100,000 plus on B2C marketing to figure out how would you approach that kind of thing. How would a company do that before BiModal? What would you recommend?
So I mean, if you're not using the sort of tools that BiModal provides, you still have to find some sort of core ground truth that you can be measuring. And the thing that we see a lot of people doing, if they don't have sophisticated tools, is basically just looking at new user counts in Google Analytics or something. And as long as the line goes up, you can sort of take an average before and take an average after and say, yeah, look, the line went up. That's something. And that's good until you run into, for example, a falling market where, well, the line went down, but maybe it went down less than it otherwise would have, or you're a growing brand and the line's going up anyway. So, well, it went up, but was it going to go up anyway? That's when you start to need the slightly more sophisticated stuff.
Okay.
Basically.
Which sounds hard.
Like yes and no.
Like, tell me about the first kind of thoughts about BiModal as a solution and what brought that about.
Absolutely. So the very first thing that we were working on is called incrementality testing. So this is, I mean, does everybody here know what an A/B test is? Yeah. Two different things. Just like you're doing a medical trial, if we see half the people see this version of the page and half of the people see this version of the page, which page converts better or sells more products or whatever. Now you can't run around Australia and tell half the people not to look at your ads, but what you can do is just run your ads in like one geographical area, right? And then you can compare that to the rest of the country. And because you can understand how this area, let's say Queensland, historically has varied compared to the rest of Australia, you can actually predict pretty well how it's going to vary into the future. So then if Queensland massively outperforms that prediction, that's fantastic. That's a really, really effective uplift test, which is robust to all of those problems of like, what if everywhere was decreasing? What if everywhere was increasing? Or what if a competitor made some big compelling change? So that's crucial because it stops all of the like angst and anxiety that normally comes along with running these tests.
Okay, but obviously hard to do. Talk us through the thinking, I will create a platform for this and what that actually looks like.
So, I mean, like my background is in data engineering and marketing, which is a bit weird, but I've built big distributed data pipelines, and I've also bought millions of dollars in TV and radio advertising. So, weird dude, but fundamentally, we can set these tools up in a way that people can just sort of pour their data into them and then get the results. And we can even try and we call it shaving off the sharp edges so that you actually, you get sort of shepherded away from the worst mistakes that people can make with these tools, and you are much more likely to get a good outcome. That's the idea. If every team has to do this themselves, they're going to need a data engineer and a marketing scientist and a UX person, and they're still going to screw it up the first sort of 6 months or so. If we can screw it up for them and then provide them a platform that just does it, that's something we can take to the world, basically.
Okay, so we'll get into more detail around what it does, but this was 2000, you're thinking about starting this?
Yeah.
So it's a kind of pandemic going on. How do you support yourself in developing something this complex post-koala?
That is a great question. So I made the very financially sound decision to leave my prestigious and well-remunerated job July 1st, 2020, and then did a lot of consulting, basically. I knew that I could charge out my time at significantly more than I had to pay the developer that I was working with to help build the product. And while this meant that I was basically living off rice and beans and my savings, we could iterate very quickly. Consulting let us sort of build the first version of the product, and then we just progressively over a period of about 12 months did less and less consulting as we got more and more SaaS clients, which is the idea.
Nice. And what did that growth look like?
Very slow and then very quick, basically.
Why?
For the first sort of 6 to 9 months, we were just trying to prove that it is possible to take these algorithms and wrap them up in a user interface and a platform that even a marketer can engage with. Sorry, marketers in the audience. Once we proved that, taking it out to market and getting more people to pay us for it was reasonably straightforward. But then you have to solve operational and sales questions, which we hadn't had to deal with before. So it's just a matter of trying to make sure that we were ready to aggressively expand out when it was time to do that. And I think you're going to ask me later about advice to myself. We were probably a bit too conservative in doing that, but that was the idea.
Because I think consulting is underrated as a way to survive in Sydney while launching a startup and engaging with a certain kind of customer that you can learn from and then apply to the product that you're developing and then provide that product to them as something when they're ready as well. That's, I think, something more people need to think about, but it works to a point, and then you end up in the situation you are in now, which looks like what?
That's a great question. You mean the team, the whole?
Yeah, they're kind of where it is today and what it's looking at?
Yeah, so I mean, today we work with 5 or 6 brands. I see you have a Euc sticker on your laptop, depends how many brands you think Eucalyptus is, and all of that house of brands. And, Koala, Red Balloon, a couple of others, and team of 5 people plus myself, which is quite nice, because again, that means a lot of stuff that I was doing is now actually being done by people who, that's their job, that's their skill set. Instead of me, the arrogant entrepreneur who thinks he can, do customer success all the time, and it turns out I'm actually very bad at getting back to people. The process of moving from strength to strength, bringing on new clients, making sure they have a great time, and then using the revenue from that to bring on more capability, I think has been really good for our growth without exploding, basically, or without blowing it up, rather.
But does it get you to where you want to go, or is there a kind of inflection point where you need to do something different, and what does that look like?
That's a great question. We're now at a point where obviously the tech works, it creates value. We're working with a number of really cool marketing teams who, we can see on the graph, right? Like amount of money spent versus amount of revenue coming in, decisions being made by the marketing team. We know that we're helping them make better decisions. And we also now are at a point where if we poured in a large number of new clients, we could be ensured that we were going to give them a good sort of experience as well. We've solved those sort of more sales and operations-based problems. So we're actually raising capital at the moment, which is exactly that inflection point.
Yep.
We know it works. We need to scale it out, sort of take it to the world.
Must be some of the easiest conversations you could have with a company at this stage and the proof points it's got.
Yeah, it's really interesting. If a company is at the point where they are struggling to scale out their marketing spend, or if you're a marketing team who are just stepping out into the very scary world of having to buy stuff that isn't just Google or Facebook, your whole psychology and way of thinking about marketing is shaped around Facebook ads and Google ads and these online platforms. So us being able to say, well, that doesn't exist, but here is sort of the next best thing, here is a way to apply that thinking to brand media, that has worked very well. It's just a matter of finding those teams, basically.
Okay. So no doubt you will find those teams.
I think so.
I'm sure some of them are here and some of them are watching down the camera. BiModal.io.
BiModal.io.
For anyone that's watching. But I want to throw in a couple of kind of advice and tidbits for people that aren't yet signed up and aren't yet utilising it.
Yeah.
For companies in that situation, B2C, spending a lot of money on acquisition, what do they get right? What do they get wrong in your experience?
So in my experience, if you're spending under $100,000 to $200,000 a year on advertising, you can probably just keep spending money on Google and Facebook. You probably haven't hit the sides of that yet. So you have an unparalleled opportunity to just very quickly try new creative treatments, try new targets, just work out how to communicate your brand and get the really tight feedback loop that Facebook gives you on that. That's incredible, that's fantastic. As soon as you're starting to see the diminishing returns from Facebook and people are starting to say, well, should we buy a billboard or something? What I do see a lot of teams do is think, especially if you talk to a media agency, they'll say, well, the minimum spend to get cut through on a campaign like this is actually going to be $400,000. So, this is just what you've got to do. And then if you're a reasonably small business and you sort of spend twice your normal yearly budget on a single campaign, by definition, you're going to be setting a lot of that money on fire. You don't have the infrastructure in place to capture all of that demand. And all of the metrics that these agencies will be able to give you will go up, right? Your brand equity will go up. People will know about you when asked. Clicks to the website will go up. But then 12 months later, when these guys eventually come into market, the people who saw your ad 12 months ago, when it's finally time for them to buy, because you haven't spoken to them in the last 12 months, they will have forgotten about you. So big, bright light campaigns, which is what everybody does first, is almost always the least efficient campaign you're ever going to run, basically.
Okay,
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Try small bets. Find things that actually are, seemingly causing some bump in your metric, any metric you care about, and then double down on what is working. It's exactly the same as PPC marketing. It's just choosing what to measure is a bit harder, right? And there's nothing wrong with new users in Google Analytics, by the way. I just use it as an example.
Okay. We'll start to wrap up. I think, looking forward, let's go 5 years in the future. What does BiModal look like then?
I think that, especially with the death of the cookie at the moment, even Google is promising to phase out cookies. This is the complete death knell of attribution, digital marketing measurement. So we have an opportunity to undo basically 20 years of damage from Google convincing everyone that last click was a reasonable way to measure advertising, and set instead a real best practice, accessible way to think about how the marketing we're doing is working. And our whole sort of mission is to make those ideas, make those techniques available to as many people as possible. In 5 years, I want BiModal, or something that looks very much like BiModal, just to be as accepted today as A/B testing is. Just another sort of tool in the belt of a marketer that, of course you should test this campaign. Of course you should consult with the media mix model says about your about how much money to spend. So yeah, I want it to be ubiquitous.
Okay. So hell of a journey.
It's been fun.
2 questions to finish up. How has that journey changed you as a person?
Yeah. So I mean, starting as a solo founder during COVID was quite a choice. I think it was the right time and it was the right thing to do, but the ultimate responsibility that you have to take as a solo founder kind of forces you to address every single one of your personal failings one after the other, which has been an interesting experience. I'm definitely a better person for having done that. But it was pretty hard, yeah. I've learned a lot about what I need to be able to improve things for other people, if that makes sense. I think anybody who is a good professional and cares about what they do is going to spend a lot of time working out how to solve problems for other people. But turning that around and saying, how do you set up a situation which is most conducive for yourself to be able to do that? And then in turn, how do you set up a business that allows your employees, your team to provide that value for other people is a very different lens. And I never had to engage with that before I was running my own business.
Okay, nice. And in the spirit of that kind of advice, if you could go back 4 years and tell yourself anything, what would it be?
As I flagged, I think we didn't move fast enough, but I want to be really specific about what I mean by that. It is not that you simply work longer hours or hate yourself more. That's very non-productive. But it is that you should have more of a bias to action, right? Be less prepared for scary conversations. Ship dumber features, right? Put up stuff with less polish. That's how you move faster. And there is a balance between wanting to make sure you're providing something that is valuable and just plain old insecurity, right? Being less insecure is easy to say, but it's definitely the advice. Right?
Okay, so Tom from 4 years ago, be less insecure, and I'm sure future Tom as well.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
But we will wrap up there because we're now going to go into the private Q&A section where the real kind of confessions come out. For anyone watching at home, every Friday at 3:30 at UTS Startups at Central, we run confessions, so come down and be part of that Q&A. But for now, we'll turn off the cameras and go into that. So for anyone watching at home, see you later. And anyone here, join me in thanking Tom from BiModal.